The broken accord. The grand hall of the Galactic Council shimmered beneath the pale blue light of its orbital dome, a gleaming monument of diplomacy and restraint, both of which were rapidly failing. Species from every corner of the known galaxy lined the vast circular amphitheater. The insectoid Vask, crystalline Therans, gelatinous Gorthai, all stared toward the central speaking platform, where the human ambassador stood, pale and visibly trembling. Members of the council, Ambassador Kent's voice echoed through the hall, brittle and desperate. The colony on Altia 4 was a peaceful medical outpost. The Zerati did not merely attack a military installation. They slaughtered civilians. They tortured one of our medics, Lieutenant Maria Solis. Her remains were. The Zerati deny official involvement, interrupted Chancellor Wheeler of the Drati Compact, his tendrils twitching in irritation. Rogue elements, perhaps. Piracy is not uncommon in the Outer Belt. A murmur of agreement rippled across the chamber. Kent gripped the podium. She was a decorated field medic, a humanitarian. She saved lives, yours included. The footage, her screams, her body was sent back to us. This was no act of piracy. This was an execution. Again, silence. Then, the doors thundered open. The hush of the chamber shattered as a human figure stepped into the light. Tall, broad-shouldered, clad in matte black combat armor, scorched and pitted. His left eye glowed faintly, a tactical implant. The right was cold steel. General Adrien Voss. Ambassador Kent, he said, voice like gravel soaked in ice. Step aside. Kent hesitated, then obeyed, relief washing over his face as he backed away from the podium. Voss climbed the steps with deliberate weight. In his right hand, he held a blood-stained chain. At the end of it hung a pair of scorched, rust-colored dog tags. He reached the center of the chamber and let them fall. They clattered loudly against the polished marble of the platform. The sound echoed, harsh and final. Voss looked up. You know what this is? The council remained silent. This belonged to Lieutenant Maria Solis. Combat medic. Humanitarian. Lifesaver. His gaze swept across the delegates. She was captured, interrogated, tortured, dismembered, alive. They cut her apart while laughing. He let that sit in the room like a growing storm. She saved a Drati child once, during the Sarkin Rebellion. Treated wounded Gorthai warriors with her own hands. She carried her oath across borders and bloodlines. Chancellor Wheeler sneered. This is emotional manipulation. We mourn all civilian deaths. But you cannot demand war over the death of one female. Voss's voice sliced through the room. You attacked our female. The council chamber froze. Some looked confused, others amused. One Theran delegate even whispered, just one? Are humans really this dramatic? Voss didn't blink. You don't understand. To us, Maria wasn't just a soldier. She was a healer, a protector. She wore no armor. She carried no gun. But she walked into war zones because others needed her. You desecrated that. You murdered what we cherish most. A murmur began to build again. Uncomprehending, patronizing. Voss took a step forward. You think we grieve for one life because we're weak. But that grief is your mistake. Maria was the soul of what we fight for. And you burned her alive. He pointed a gloved hand at the Zerati delegate, whose scales flickered nervously. Return the names of those responsible. Surrender them to us, alive. Or the stars will burn for what you did. Chancellor Wheeler laughed derisively. Are we to bow every time a human weeps? You overreach, General. Voss stared at him. No rage. Just promise. You mistake mourning for restraint. That was your final warning. Without another word, he turned and walked away, the blood-stained tags swinging like a metronome of death. As the chamber erupted into arguments and diplomatic protests, only one being watched in silence. A young alien girl among the council guard, her wide black eyes fixated on the name burned into the tags. Maria Solis. The line is crossed. The war room aboard the HSS Resolute pulsed with quiet fury. General Adrien Voss stood at the central holographic display, eyes locked on a rotating model of Altia 4. Around him, Commanders and aides watched in silence as red-marked zones expanded over the colony terrain, each marking a site of confirmed civilian execution or desecration. The devastation wasn't just military. It was intimate, deliberate. They knew it was a medical outpost, Voss said at last, his voice a blade held barely in check. Maria wore white. She carried no weapon. That wasn't a raid. It was a message. Colonel Young, second in command, clenched her jaw. And now we send ours. But Voss didn't reply. His fingers traced the perimeter of the ruined colony, pausing on the clinic site. The transmission logs recovered from Maria's personal comm still replayed in his mind. Her calm voice requesting triage, supplies, even as explosions shook the ground. The feed cut out mid-sentence. The last thing she said was, "Tell Voss to keep the kids safe." She had known what was coming. "General," Yang said more gently, "the Diplomatic Council on Earth is calling for restraint. They want another inquiry." Voss finally looked up. "We already had one. It ended when they mailed us our bones." He stepped away from the table and walked toward the viewing port, the stars stretched into soft silver arcs by the ship's movement. "They don't understand us, Yang. Not really. They think our anger is random, that our vengeance is undisciplined. But this is measured." Yang nodded. "Fleet Group Umbra stands ready. 18 strike cruisers, 6 carriers, 1 dreadnought." Voss glanced back. "We're not aiming for genocide, but we will make them understand consequence." News of Voss's confrontation in the Galactic Council chamber had exploded across human space. The broadcast, leaked by unknown sources, circulated through every colony, every military channel, every household with a connection to the mesh. But it wasn't the gruesome nature of Maria's death that stirred humanity. It was Voss's voice. "You attacked our female." Simple, unyielding, heavy with a meaning no translation system could fully carry. On Luna, protest crowds surged outside the Earth Diplomatic Assembly, holding up signs with her name, her image, her uniform with the medic armband. On Mars, thousands volunteered for military service within hours. On Europa, a monument was erected overnight, a pair of bronze hands holding a medical bag, surrounded by the inscription, "She chose to heal." On Earth, veterans gathered in silence at Maria's childhood home. Her mother placed her daughter's final commendation beneath a growing field of candles. Back aboard the Resolute, Voss reviewed intercepted Zerati communications. They mocked the humans, called them weak, emotional creatures ruled by grief. He turned to his comm officer. "Patch a fleet-wide transmission. I want it on civilian channels, too." A moment later, the broadcast began. "This is General Adrien Voss, Task Force Umbra." His face filled screens across solar systems. Hard, scarred, with fury buried beneath iron resolve. "We warned them. We pleaded for peace. We gave them our best. And they murdered her." A pause. He held up her tags. Lieutenant Maria Solis. Combat medic. Civilian rescuer. Treaty emissary. They burned her alive. He lowered the tags. "We are not coming for conquest. We're not coming for land. We're not coming for pride." A cold breath. "We are coming because we remember. We protect our own. And we will never allow a healer to be hunted again." He leaned forward. "This is not war. This is the reckoning." The screen went black. Elsewhere, within the high towers of the Galactic Council spire, chaos churned behind polished walls. Ambassadors from dozens of species shouted across the chamber, accusing humanity of overreaction, of emotional instability, of primitive vengeance. But not all were so sure. Among the chaos, a young Drati female in ceremonial guard armor watched the recording again. Her name was Tevala. She was barely more than an initiate, her caste a minor one. But she had never forgotten the human woman who had once carried her out of rubble, pressed a bandage against her chest, and whispered, "You're going to live." Tevala had lived, and now the same woman was dead. She was kind, Tevala whispered, tears rising without warning. She didn't even ask what I was. The senior guard next to her grunted. "Humans are dangerous. Always have been." Tevala turned her head. "So is fire. But it's what keeps you warm." She turned back to the screen, where Voss's final words repeated in eerie silence. "This is the reckoning." And Tevela believed him. "The fire we bring." Zarati Command Station Varnak. 7 didn't see them coming. One moment, their orbit was clear. The next, stars vanished behind shadows. Dozens of human warships sliding out of warp space like predators from the abyss. Task Force Umbra had arrived. No warnings. No hails. Only silence. And then fire. The first salvo came from the human dreadnought HSS Gallant, its spinal-mounted particle lance cutting through Varnak 7's defense grid like paper. Shield towers imploded. Barracks vaporized. Automated flak batteries never even had a chance to calibrate. Within 6 minutes, the Zarati Command Hub, a structure the size of a small city, was reduced to molten wreckage. On the bridge of the Resolute, Voss gave a single nod. "Proceed to next target." Colonel Yang stepped forward, voice quiet but resolute. "We've confirmed at least 47 officers stationed there, all part of the 4th Zarati Vanguard. The same division deployed near Altia 4 last cycle." Voss didn't flinch. "Mark them. Continue." Across the sector, human ships struck like hammers, swift, targeted, unrelenting. Orbital shipyards, deep space listening posts, command buoys. All military. All chosen with surgical precision. No civilian hubs. No planetary bombardments. Yet the message was unmistakable. This wasn't conquest. This was discipline sharpened into vengeance. Galactic news feeds lit up in real time. Each destruction recorded, each attack captioned with the now familiar phrase. For Maria, some council species were horrified, others stunned into silence. For centuries, humanity had been the youngest voice in the chamber. Passionate, unruly, often idealistic. Now, there was something else. Feared. In a dim council chamber, Tevela stood watch in her ceremonial armor, absorbing every word as the latest footage played. Flames danced across the hollowed remains of Varnak 7. Human rescue craft hovered at the edges, scanning for survivors, still saving lives, even in vengeance. "They still rescue," she whispered. Chancellor Wheeler sneered, scales curling. "Yes, yes. Such noble butchers." Tevela's jaw tightened. They didn't kill civilians. Only the ones who gave the order, even when no one would have stopped them. Wheeler turned. "You speak as if you admire them." "I admire justice." He leaned in closer. "You forget your place." But Tevela's eyes didn't leave the burning wreckage on the screen. "No, I remember exactly who saved it." Back aboard the Resolute, General Voss stood alone in the chapel-like silence of the Memorial Bay. Dozens of names were etched into dark steel. Soldiers, medics, diplomats, those who had died trying to make peace between humans and the galaxy. Maria's name now shone at the center. He placed her tags on the base of her engraving. There was no speech, only the soft hiss of recycled air and the distant hum of a ship coiled in quiet fury. Colonel Yang's voice broke the silence, intercepted a Zarati diplomatic burst. "They're calling for negotiations. Terms. They demand a ceasefire. Say your actions violate interstellar war codes." Voss smiled bitterly. Now they remember the codes. Yang hesitated. "They say they'll consider investigating the Altia 4 massacre if we halt our advance." Voss turned to face her, eyes like carved stone. "No, not until we have the names. The ones who gave the order. The ones who lit the fire." He stepped past her toward the command deck. "And we don't stop until they know exactly who we are." In the Zarati war chamber on Prime Nest, Supreme Commander Zareth pounded his claws against the data panel, mandibles twitching in rage. They strike without challenge. They mourn one female and unleash hell. "Primitive beasts," growled another officer. But Zareth didn't reply. He stared at the last human broadcast, the general's face, the voice, the cold precision. He wasn't like the politicians the Zarati had grown used to ignoring. This one had buried something, and it had claws. Elsewhere, in backwater colonies and neutral sectors, whispers spread like wildfire. The humans are marching. They fight not for conquest, but because someone broke their code. They honor their dead like gods. And when gods are dishonored, even non-human factions began quietly pulling back from disputed borders. Trade alliances with humans suddenly surged. Former critics now sent cautious messages of support, offering tribute and intelligence. Because the galaxy had begun to understand. You could mock humanity's emotions. You could scorn their compassion. But if you broke what they held sacred, they would burn across the stars to remind you why they were feared. Back in her quarters, Tevelis sat in silence, staring at the image of Maria's face, young, tired, smiling in a sea of blood-streaked war zones. Not a warrior, not a politician, just a medic with a bag of hope and hands that had once stopped her bleeding. Tevela reached into her locker and removed the ribbon Maria had tied around her arm so long ago. The color had faded, but not the memory. "Forgive us," she whispered. Outside, in the cold void of space, the human fleet advanced. The reckoning delivered. The skies above Zerati Prime turned black. Thousands of dark-armored human drop pods descended through the atmosphere like a silent meteor storm. Anti-orbital defenses fired blindly into the clouds, but the pods moved too fast, tactically scattered, coordinated, unstoppable. At the head of the strike force rode General Adrien Voss, encased in battle-worn exo-armor, the gleam of Maria's dog tags now welded to his left pauldron. This wasn't a war of armies. It was a surgical purge. Objective, extract the names. Priority, alive if possible. Authorization, directive Solis. The storm had come. Supreme Commander Zareth watched from the Zerati Prime Command Citadel, eyes wide, mandibles clicking rapidly. They breached atmosphere in under 3 minutes. No declaration, no warning. His defense strategist stammered. They skipped orbital bombardment. No attempt to destroy infrastructure. Just straight to the palace. Zareth snarled. "Fools! They're not taking territory. They're taking me." A massive explosion rocked the floor beneath them. The wall-mounted monitors flickered, outer perimeter breached. Human boots were now inside the city. Voss led the breach team through the scorched streets of the capital. Every movement was clockwork, covering arcs, drone overwatch, tactical silence. Their target, the Council Chamber Tower. It housed the high-ranking Zerati leaders, including the military command who'd signed off on the Altia 4 operation. Gunfire erupted in the distance. Zerati soldiers, those who hadn't already abandoned their posts, fought back in scattered pockets. Voss's team neutralized them with quiet brutality. No prisoners, no wasted rounds. They stormed the lower levels, disabling security gates, hacking through biometric locks, sweeping corridor by corridor. Then they found them. 5 Zerati officers cowering inside a secure chamber, surrounded by failing auto turrets and heat shields. One bore the black-slashed insignia of a field commander. Voss knew his face. He had seen it on the data logs from Altia 4, laughing while Maria screamed. Voss stepped forward. The officer hissed, "You're here for revenge." Voss shook his head. "No." He dropped a small projector. It lit the room with a still image. Maria Solis, face bruised, hand bound, and still smiling. The last frame from a medical drone before the Zerati destroyed it. "You're here," Voss said, voice level, "because you failed to learn what that smile meant." He raised his rifle. The other Zerati screamed. 12 hours later, the transmission played on every channel in the galaxy. The surviving Zerati commanders, bound, unharmed, were handed over to the Galactic Council under armed escort. Their identities, rank, and war crimes confessed in full, broadcast in 6,000 languages. Humanity had brought no mass destruction, no cities leveled, no civilians harmed, just precision, justice, and the overwhelming clarity of purpose. At the next emergency session of the Galactic Council, there were no objections when Earth's delegation walked in. There were only eyes that did not dare to meet Voss's. He stood silently behind Ambassador Kent, who placed a sealed record on the speaking platform. These are the names. Signed confessions. Locations of mass graves on Altia 4. Evidence that proves coordinated strikes by the Zerati military. No one spoke. Humanity will not seek territory. We will not demand reparations. We ask only one thing. He stepped aside. Voss moved forward. This council will ensure that no non-combatant of any species is ever again used as a weapon, that the murder of a healer is never excused as a footnote of war. He let the room sit with it. She was more than a medic. She was proof that peace was possible. You took that proof. Now you will honor her memory. No one dared disagree. 2 cycles later, a monument was raised in the center of the Galactic Council spire. A towering statue of Maria Solis stood in full field gear, medical kit in hand, gaze soft, posture strong. Around her feet were carvings of dozens of species she had treated. The base read, "She chose to heal the galaxy. The galaxy will not forget." Far from the galactic core, in a small, half-rebuilt village on Altia 4, a young Drati girl approached the fresh gardens growing near the new clinic. Tevala, no longer a guard, now a council ambassador in training, laid a single white flower beneath a bronze plaque. Then she turned and looked toward the stars. "Thank you, Maria," she whispered. Behind her, the village children ran beneath solar canopies, laughing. And far overhead, the HSS Resolute moved quietly into warp space. Its mission fulfilled, its oath kept. The galaxy had learned the meaning of one simple truth. You can challenge humanity. You can even hurt it. But if you target what it loves, you will never forget the fire that follows.